One wall of water. 20 minutes. 500,000 people gone before sunrise. Not a bomb. Not a war. Just water, mud, and a river that forgot its banks. And this isn't even the deadliest thing that ever happened to our planet. That's still coming. Stay with me. Humans have survived plagues, wars, famines built by other humans. But some of the worst body counts in history came from something no one could fight back against, the planet itself. Earthquakes that swallowed cities in 90 seconds. Storms that erased entire coastlines. A volcano so loud people 2,000 miles away thought it was cannon fire. This is a countdown through the deadliest natural disasters ever recorded, and it ends with the single deadliest one. A catastrophe so massive most people have never even heard its name. September 8, 1900. Galveston, Texas, is the richest city in the state. Wide beaches. A busy port. Nobody's worried about the weather. The local Weather Bureau chief, Isaac Klein, had publicly said it was absurd to think a major hurricane could ever hit the island. He was wrong by nightfall. Winds hit an estimated 145 miles per hour. A storm surge over 15 feet tall rolled straight across an island that sat, at its highest point, just 8 feet above sea level. There was nowhere to run. Nowhere higher to climb. Houses didn't just flood. They were lifted off their foundations and slammed into each other, grinding into a wall of splintered wood that flattened everything behind it. By morning, somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 people were dead. To this day, it's the deadliest natural disaster in United States history. Deadlier than 9/11, deadlier than Katrina. Bodies were so numerous that officials gave up on burial. They loaded corpses onto barges to dump at sea, and when the tide brought them back to shore days later, they resorted to burning them in piles right on the beach. Klein survived. His pregnant wife did not. But that wasn't even the worst storm death toll in this list. Not close. August 27, 1883. The volcanic island of Krakatoa, sitting in the strait between Java and Sumatra, doesn't just erupt, it detonates. The final blast is estimated at 200 megatons, thousands of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. People in Perth, Australia, over 1,800 miles away, heard it. Sailors near the island went permanently deaf. It remains, by most estimates, the loudest sound ever recorded in human history. But the sound wasn't what killed people. The eruption collapsed part of the island into the sea, triggering tsunamis over 120 feet high that smashed into coastal villages across the Sunda Strait. Entire towns vanished in minutes. Roughly 36,000 people died, most of them from the waves, not the eruption itself. Ash plunged the region into darkness for days. Global temperatures dropped for years afterward. Sunsets around the world turned an eerie blood red for months. Some art historians believe it's the exact sky captured in Edvard Munch's painting The Scream. A century later, a new volcanic cone rose from the same crater. Locals call it Anak Krakatau, child of Krakatoa. It's still active today. Here's one most people have never even heard of, and it might be the single most destructive volcanic eruption in recorded history. April 1815. Mount Tambora, on the Indonesian island of Sumbawa, erupts with a force so massive it blew roughly 36 cubic miles of rock and ash into the stratosphere, the biggest eruption in at least 1,300 years. Around 10,000 people died instantly from the blast, pyroclastic flows, and tsunamis. That's not the horrifying part. The ash cloud spread across the entire planet and blocked out sunlight for months. 1816 became known worldwide as the year without a summer. Snow fell in June in New England. Crops failed across Europe, China, and North America. Famine and disease that followed are estimated to have killed anywhere from 60,000 to over 100,000 additional people. Some historians push that number even higher when you count the global famine ripple effects. One strange side effect, the gloomy, freezing summer of 1816 trapped a group of writers indoors at a villa in Switzerland. Bored and cold, one of them, 18-year-old Mary Shelley, started writing a story to pass the time. That story became Frankenstein. A volcano most people have never heard of may have accidentally created one of the most famous horror novels ever written. So far we've covered a hurricane that flattened a city, the loudest sound in history, and a volcano that froze the entire planet. But every single one of these is about to look small compared to what's coming. May 31st, 1970. The Ancash region of Peru is hit by a magnitude 7.9 earthquake. The shaking itself is bad, but it's what happens next that turns this into one of the deadliest single events on this entire list. The quake shakes loose a massive chunk of ice and rock from the north face of Huascaran, Peru's tallest mountain. It comes down as a debris avalanche, a churning wall of ice, mud, and boulders moving at an estimated 170 miles per hour. It travels over 11 miles in under 4 minutes. The town of Yungay sat directly in its path. Survivors described a roar like a jet engine seconds before it hit. The avalanche buried the entire town under mud and rock in what witnesses estimated was under a single minute. An estimated 20,000 people in Yungay alone were killed almost instantly, nearly the entire population. A small number of survivors only made it because they ran uphill to a cemetery on a hill overlooking the town, or were at a nearby stadium watching a circus performance that happened to be positioned on higher ground. Total death toll across the region from the quake and avalanche combined is estimated at 70,000 people. Yungay was never rebuilt on the same spot. The Peruvian government declared the buried town a national cemetery. It sits there today, a green field with a few protruding rooftops and palm trees marking where a town of thousands used to stand. But that wasn't even the same year's deadliest disaster. November 12, 1970. The Bhola cyclone slams into the densely populated coastal islands of what was then East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Wind speeds reached roughly 115 to 130 miles per hour. But the real killer was the storm surge. Waves over 30 feet high crashing onto low-lying river delta islands where hundreds of thousands of people lived, many with no warning system at all. There was no evacuation plan. No sirens. Many residents didn't even know a cyclone was coming until the water was already at their doorsteps in the middle of the night. Estimates vary wildly because record-keeping in the region was so limited, but most historians place the death toll between 300,000 and 500,000 people, making it, by many counts, the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded on Earth. The disaster also had massive political consequences. The government's slow, inadequate response fueled outrage that helped spark the Bangladesh Liberation War just months later, ultimately leading to Bangladesh's independence in 1971. A storm didn't just kill hundreds of thousands of people. It helped topple a government. And we're not even to the earthquake that some geologists call one of the most underreported mass casualty events of the entire 20th century yet. Let's move fast through 4 more catastrophic events that shaped how the world handles disaster response forever. Johnstown, 1889. A poorly maintained private dam above a Pennsylvania steel town collapsed after days of heavy rain, unleashing 20 million tons of water in what witnesses described as a moving wall 30 to 40 feet high. It hit Johnstown at freight train speed. Roughly 2,209 people died. Debris piled against a stone bridge downstream caught fire, burning alive victims already trapped in the wreckage. Messina, Italy, 1908. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake followed by a tsunami up to 40 feet high hit the Sicilian coast at 5:20 in the morning while most people were asleep. An estimated 75,000 to 82,000 people died in Messina alone. Some estimates for the wider region go past 100,000. It remains one of the deadliest earthquakes in European history. Armero, Colombia, 1985. The eruption of Nevado del Ruiz melted glacial ice, sending Alaja, a volcanic mudflow, barreling down the mountain at night. It buried the sleeping town of Armero under nearly 30 feet of mud. Roughly 23,000 people died, including a young girl named Omaira Sanchez, whose 60-hour struggle trapped in the debris, filmed live for the world to see, became one of the most haunting images in modern disaster history. San Francisco, 1906. A magnitude 7.9 earthquake ruptured the San Andreas Fault, but it was the fires that followed, raging for 4 days because broken water mains left firefighters with nothing to fight them with, that destroyed over 80% of the city. Death toll estimates range from 3,000 to over 6,000. 4 disasters. 4 completely different mechanisms of death: a collapsing dam, a tsunami, a mudflow, a fire. All in under 20 years of each other. We've now covered hurricanes, volcanoes, avalanches, dam failures, and fires. What's left? The single deadliest mechanism of all, the earthquake. And the ones coming up are almost impossible to comprehend. July 28, 1976. 3:42 in the morning. The industrial Chinese city of Tangshan, population over 1 million, is hit without warning by a magnitude 7.6 earthquake centered almost directly beneath the city itself. There was no advance alert. Most of the population was asleep in brick buildings never designed to withstand serious shaking. The quake struck so violently that railway tracks were twisted into S-shapes and the ground itself visibly rippled like water. Officially, China reported roughly 242,000 deaths. Independent researchers and later estimates suggest the true number could be as high as 655,000, making it possibly the deadliest earthquake of the 20th century. For years, the Chinese government restricted information about the disaster's true scale, and international aid was initially refused, a decision widely criticized decades later. The city was almost completely leveled. Somehow, Tangshan was rebuilt within a decade, and today it stands as a memorial city, with an earthquake museum built directly on the ruins so the scale is never forgotten. December 26, 2004. A magnitude 9.1 earthquake, one of the most powerful ever recorded, ruptures the ocean floor off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. It's so powerful it actually shortened the length of Earth's day by a fraction of a microsecond and caused the entire planet to vibrate. The quake displaces an enormous volume of seawater, sending tsunami waves racing across the Indian Ocean at speeds up to 500 miles per hour, as fast as a jet airliner. There was no tsunami warning system in the Indian Ocean at the time. None. Coastal communities across 14 countries, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and beyond, had no idea what was coming until walls of water up to 100 feet high were already crashing onto their beaches. An estimated 230,000 people died across the region in a single morning. Whole resort towns were wiped from the map in Thailand. Entire fishing villages in Indonesia's Aceh province simply ceased to exist. Survivors described the ocean pulling back hundreds of feet before the wave arrived, a warning sign almost nobody recognized in time. It remains one of the deadliest natural disasters ever recorded in modern history, and it directly led to the creation of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System that exists today. But even a 230,000 death toll isn't the top of this list. There's one disaster still coming that dwarfs every single number you've heard so far, combined. January 12, 2010. A magnitude 7.0 earthquake strikes just 16 miles from Port-au-Prince, Haiti's capital, one of the most densely populated cities in the Western Hemisphere, built largely with poor construction standards and little earthquake-resistant infrastructure. The shaking lasted only about 35 seconds. It was enough to collapse the National Palace, the main cathedral, hospitals, schools, and hundreds of thousands of homes. Government estimates placed the death toll as high as 220,000 to 316,000 people, though later independent assessments suggested lower but still catastrophic numbers in the range of 100,000 to 160,000. The exact figure remains disputed to this day, partly because Haiti's government infrastructure was itself destroyed in the quake, making an accurate count nearly impossible. An estimated 1.5 million people were left homeless. A cholera outbreak followed months later, killing thousands more, worsened by damaged water infrastructure and overcrowded relief camps. More than a decade later, parts of Port-au-Prince still bear visible scars from that single afternoon. March 11, 2011. A magnitude 9.0 to 9.1 earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Japan's history, strikes off the northeast coast. Despite Japan having some of the most advanced earthquake engineering on the planet, nothing could stop what came next. The quake triggered a tsunami with waves reaching over 130 feet in some coastal areas, traveling inland as far as 6 miles in parts of Sendai. Entire towns were washed away in minutes. Nearly 20,000 people died or went missing. Then came the second disaster. The tsunami disabled backup power systems at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, triggering meltdowns in 3 reactors, the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl in 1986. Over 150,000 people were evacuated from the surrounding exclusion zone, some permanently. Video footage from that day shows something almost impossible to process. Cars, entire houses, boats, all being swept inland together across farmland like toys in a bathtub. Japan's earthquake early warning system gave some residents just seconds to react. 4,000 seconds weren't enough. April 29, 1991. Just 2 decades after Bhola devastated the same region, another catastrophic cyclone hits Bangladesh's coast. This time with sustained winds around 155 miles per hour and a storm surge reaching 20 feet. This time there were early warning systems in place, but many coastal islanders either didn't receive the warning in time or had nowhere higher to evacuate to. An estimated 138,000 people died, the vast majority from drowning in the surge. The disaster became a brutal case study in disaster preparedness. In the decades since, Bangladesh has built tens of thousands of cyclone shelters and developed one of the most effective early warning and evacuation systems in the world, a direct response to the horror of 1991 and to Bhola before it. Cyclones of similar strength since then have killed a fraction of the people. Proof that infrastructure and warning systems can be the difference between hundreds of thousands of deaths and a few hundred. Every single disaster you've just heard about killed anywhere from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands of people. Now brace yourself, because the deadliest natural disaster in all of recorded history killed more people than nearly all of these combined, and almost nobody outside of China has ever heard its name. Summer, 1931. Central China. The Yangtze and Huai river systems, already swollen from an unusually harsh winter snowmelt, are hit by an almost unbelievable string of consecutive tropical storms. 7 or more cyclones in a single season slamming into the same drainage basin, one after another, with barely any time to recover between them. The rivers didn't just flood. They rose to levels that, in some places, exceeded 53 feet above normal. Water submerged an area estimated at over 70,000 square miles, roughly the size of England, across some of the most densely populated farmland on the planet. Entire cities, including parts of Wuhan, then one of China's largest urban centers, were submerged for months. Survivors lived on rooftops, on floating debris, in trees, for weeks at a time, watching the water refuse to recede as more storms kept adding to it. Then came what killed far more people than the initial flooding itself: famine and disease. With farmland destroyed and grain stores underwater or rotted, mass starvation swept the region. Cholera, dysentery, and typhoid outbreaks tore through survivors already weakened by hunger, crammed together in makeshift refugee camps with no clean water. Reports from the time describe corpses floating past survivors for weeks, too numerous to recover or bury. Estimates of the total death toll vary enormously depending on the source, from a low of around 400,000 to figures exceeding 4 million people when factoring in the full famine and disease aftermath that stretched over the following year. Even the most conservative serious estimates place it well above anything else on this entire list. Most historians and disaster researchers now consider the 1931 China floods the deadliest natural disaster ever recorded in human history, deadlier than every earthquake, every tsunami, every hurricane discussed in this video, potentially combined. And yet, ask almost anyone outside China if they've heard of it, and the answer is almost always no. Every disaster in this video reshaped the place it hit. New building codes, new warning systems, new governments, even new novels born out of a volcano's ash cloud. But the deadliest one of all barely exists in the world's collective memory, which might be the most unsettling takeaway of the entire list. History doesn't always remember its worst days. Sometimes it just moves on. If a flood you'd probably never heard of just beat every earthquake and hurricane on this list combined, imagine what else has been quietly erased from the history books. Drop a comment. Which of these disasters shocked you the most? And which one had you never even heard of before today? And if you want more forgotten catastrophes like this, go watch our next video, History's Deadliest Epidemics Explained.